Here are the top stories for today, February 5, 2021. List of priority groups for COVID-19 vaccine is now approved. Subway project in Metro Manila is underway. Filipinos are among those who are more inclined to buy electric vehicles. And Sasmuan coastal wetland in Pampanga gets international recognition. Good day, I'm William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. President Rodrigo Duterte is confident that the armed forces of the Philippines would defeat insurgency and terrorism under its new Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobejana. The details from Chris Mundo.
Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobejana has formally assumed as the head of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Sobejana was former chief of the Philippine Army. He replaced General Gilbert Gapay, who retired yesterday. During the change of command ceremony, President Rodrigo Duterte said he believes that the newly installed AFP chief can lead the military in combating insurgency and terrorism. Sobejana thanked the president, giving assurance that he will do his best to be on top of the situation at all times.
I am confident that under Lieutenant General Sobejana's leadership, the AFP will achieve even more milestones in the campaign to address the insurgency and terror and put an end to all these threats to our national security.
As the newly installed Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, I implore every Filipino to be one with every soldier, sailor, airman, marine, and civilian human resource of the Armed Forces of the Philippines in our fight against the enemies of the state and other threats.
Sobejana is a member of the Philippine Military Academy Hinirang Class of 1987. He served as the commanding general of the Philippine Army since July last year. He also commanded the Joint Task Force Sulu, the Maguindanao-based 6th Infantry Division, and the Western Mindanao Command. Sobejana is a recipient of the Medal of Valor, the country's highest military award that is equivalent to the Congressional Medal of Honor of the United States. He earned his Medal of Valor Award in 1995 after leading the fight with an estimated 150 Abu Sayyaf terrorists in Isabela town in Basilan, despite sustaining crippling wounds in the encounter. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Chris Mundo.
Meanwhile, retired AFP Chief of Staff General Gilbert Gapay was being offered the position in the Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System or the Department of National Defense. President Duterte made the offer as he hailed Gapay's contributions to the AFP's successful fight against insurgency. Gapay was appointed AFP Chief on August 3 last year. He also served as Philippine Army Commander.
Sir, after tonight, you might opt to take the MWSS vacated by General Salamat, or you might also choose to be with your home ground, the DND. It's your choice. During your tenure, you have commendably steered the men and women of the AFP towards our goal of eliminating insurgency and securing our sovereignty. Your example of hard work and excellence has set a high standard not only for you and those around you, but most especially for the institution's future leadership, the Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Malacanang said democracy is very much alive in the country. Presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque made this remark after the Philippines slipped one place to number 55 out of the 167 countries in Democracy Index. The study made by London-based think tank The Economist Intelligence Unit show that the Philippines slid one notch as it got a score of 6.56 in 2020 from 6.64 in 2019. The think tank's findings also show decrease in civil liberties at 6.47 against 7.06 in 2019, and the functioning of government is now at a flat 5.0 from 5.38. Chief Presidential Legal Counsel Salvador Panelo earlier said endless criticisms from political opposition as well as government detractors are proof that the administration respects democracy.
Well, it's one notch lower, so hindi po yan major slip, kumbaga. At kung titignan po natin ang datos, no, naunahan po tayo ng Taiwan, Malaysia at Timor-Leste, pero we are ahead of Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Laos. In other words, ahead of almost all the major countries of Southeast Asia. So we will strive to do better, pero that ranking po shows that democracy is very much alive in the Philippines. Our democratic institutions are working. We have an independent judiciary, an independent legislative department, and of course, an executive department that is always the victim of criticisms.
The European Union, or EU, assured that its export controls on COVID-19 vaccines will not hamper the Philippines' access to them. EU announced that the Philippines is among the 92 low- and middle-income countries which are exempted from the ban on the exportation of COVID-19 vaccines. This clarification was made after President Rodrigo Duterte accused them of hostage the British-Swedish drug maker's AstraZeneca vaccine.
Tignan mo ang ng European Union sa the European Union's medicines regulator on Friday recommended authorizing the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine for the use among its 27 member states. The European Union has voiced concerns that vaccines could not be sent abroad before companies fulfilling obligations in their block. Ganong kadali. Ang atin dito, ASEAN, but we are not really as powerful as the EU. Yung AstraZeneca, hinostage ng European Union.
Kinakailangan naman talaga ng paglilinaw, no? Kasi ang lumalabas, nagkakaroon nga po ng vaccine nationalism, no? At yun po yung issue na linabas sa ating presidente. Ngayon nagkaroon ng kanyang paglilinaw, we appreciate it, no? Pero kung hindi po nagsalita ang presidente, hindi sila magbibigay ng linaw na ganyan.
Meanwhile, vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. earlier clarified that the Philippines would not have a problem in securing supplies of AstraZeneca vaccines since their doses would be manufactured in either Thailand or India. AstraZeneca is one of the 7 vaccine manufacturers the Philippines is in talks with for vaccine supply deals.
Yung AstraZeneca rin po, nagbigay rin po ang COVAX ng 5 to 5.5 million to 9.2 million. Gusto po namin magpasalamat sa WHO sa Gavi dahil kasi talagang they're giving so much premium on the equity of access to poor countries and developing countries.
The list of priority population groups for the inoculation of the COVID-19 vaccines in the country is already approved by the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases. Priority Group A include frontline health workers, health professionals and non-professionals, senior citizens, persons with comorbidities, frontline personnel in essential sectors including uniformed personnel, and the indigent population. Meanwhile, Priority Group B include teachers, social workers, other government workers, other essential workers, socio-demographic groups at significantly higher risk other than senior citizens and indigenous people. It also includes overseas Filipino workers and other remaining workforce. Meanwhile, the rest of the Filipino population are placed in Priority Group C. Metro Manila mayors have expressed willingness to be the first to get vaccinated once the COVID-19 vaccines arrive in their cities. The details from Laid Gabagani.
San Juan City Mayor Francis Zamora has volunteered to get the first shot of COVID-19 vaccine in his locality to boost the confidence of his constituents. Zamora said the city government is targeting at least 70% of the city's population to volunteer for the inoculation program. In Valenzuela City, Mayor Rex Gatchalian said he is willing to be the first in his city to get vaccinated of any brand of COVID-19 vaccine, as long as it has passed the stringent regulatory process of the Food and Drug Administration. Gatchalian urged his constituents to sign up for the city's online vaccine registration for Valenzuela City Vaccination or VisiVax campaign to get free shots of the vaccine. In Caloocan City, Mayor Oka Malapitan said he is willing to get the first shot of any brand of COVID-19 vaccine to prove its safety and efficacy. He said he is willing to do it publicly if necessary so that his constituents would feel his sincerity. In Manila City, Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Domagoso said he is willing to get vaccinated publicly. He said he is willing to get a first shot regardless of the brand, as long as the vaccine that will be administered to him had been certified by the country's FDA. In Pasig City, Mayor Vico Soto is urging his constituents to trust experts in the selection of COVID-19 vaccines. He said the local government does not force its residents to get vaccinated, but they are encouraged for their own safety. He assured his constituents that vaccines are safe as long as it is approved by the FDA. In Makati City, Mayor Abby Binay appealed to her constituents to trust the national government's efforts to come out with the best COVID-19 vaccination program. Binay assured the city government will double its efforts to encourage more residents to get vaccinated. In Marikina City, Mayor Marcelino Chodoro said the city government has set aside a local indemnification fund to assist residents who would suffer from severe illness or any adverse effect as a result of administering the COVID-19 vaccines. He said the local government is putting up this COVID assistance fund in order to build up the trust and confidence of the people. And in Pasay City, Mayor Emmy Calixto Rubiano said she is willing to get the first shot of any brand of COVID-19 vaccine to convince more of her constituents to do the same. She said vaccination is the only way to bring back a normalcy in the country. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Laid Gabagani.
Wearing a face mask is now the new normal, as we are mandated to wear this at all times, especially when going out. But still, some of our kababayans are not wearing it the right way. What are your suggested actions for those who are not following the correct wearing a face mask? Let's find out the answers of some of our kababayans here in our Boses ng Masa.
Ang sagot ko sa katanungang ito ay dapat bigyan ng kaukulang parusa sa pamamagitan ng pagmulta. Halimbawa, 3 beses na itong inulit ay kailangan niyang magbayad ng 1,000 upang sa ganun ay mabigyan siya ng leksyon at hindi niya na ito uulitin, dahil alam naman natin na ang pagsusuot ng face mask ay isa sa mga health protocol. Kaya ang parusang ito ay nararapat na naigawad sa kanya.
Kapag nakakita ka ng tao na hindi wasto ang pagsusuot ng face mask, ay pagsabihan mo dahil hindi lamang ang kanyang sarili ang nalalagay sa alanganin, pati na din ang sa ibang tao. Maaari din siyang parusahan dahil sa hindi pagsunod sa health and safety protocol na ipinapatubad ng ating gobyerno.
Dapat talaga tayong paggamit ng wastong paggamit ng face mask at saka face shield. Kasi importante ito para sa ating proteksyon ng ating kalusugan, para sa akin, para din sa aking pamilya, at saka sa mga tao sa palibot ko. Dapat talaga tayong sumunod, hindi lang dahil utos ito ng gobyerno. At kung talagang hindi sila susunod, siguro dapat silang sitahin or i-remind na talagang dapat sundin ang wastong paggamit ng face mask.
For me, ma'am, sa mga taong hindi marunong gumamit ng face mask, dapat pagmultahin at bigyan ng citation kasi matagal-tagal na ding pinanukala ng gobyerno na magsuot ng face mask at paano gamitin ito na mabuti. Yan lang po.
Ang dapat gawin sa mga taong hindi tamang pagsusuot ng face mask ay bigyan sila ng leksyon at pagmultahin. Dapat tayo ay marunong sumunod sa health protocol para iwas sa pagdami ng positive cases ng COVID-19.
Sa pagsusuot ng face mask, dapat ang implementing agencies ipapatupad talaga kung ano ang dapat. Sa mga hindi nagsusuot ng face mask, kung ano man ang mga multa, dapat i-apply talaga para magiging tumbawas.
Dito, inuuli kami pag walang face mask, walang face shield, para matuto rin yung mga tao. Mag-ingat rin sa sarili natin. Kasi kawawa rin tayo pag piktado tayo.
Still to come, subway project in Metro Manila is underway. And Filipinos are among those who are more inclined to buy electric vehicles. More on these when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Pangalagaan ang sarili laban sa Coronavirus Disease 2019. Hanggat maaari, umiwas sa mataong lugar. Iwasang hawakan ang ilong at bibig, maging malinis sa katawan at ugaliin ang wastong paghuhugas ng kamay. Takpan ang ilong at bibig kung uubo o babahing. Umiwas sa mga taong nagpapakita ng sintomas ng coronavirus disease gaya ng lagnat, ubo at sipon. Magsuot ng face mask kung kinakailangan. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Malacanang assures that a whole-of-government approach is being used to address the issue of supply and high prices of pork products. Presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque Jr. said President Rodrigo Duterte strongly supported the recommendations of the Department of Agriculture and other departments to stabilize the supplies and prices of major food commodities, particularly pork and chicken.
Una, ang DA Regional Feed Units at iba pang attached agencies at mga korporasyon ng DA ay maglalaan ng resources para bumili ng mga baboy mula Visayas at Mindanao at mga probinsya sa Luzon na ASF-free. At itatransport ang mga ito sa mga pangunahing pampublikong palengke sa Metro Manila simula ngayong weekend sa presyong mula 270 hanggang 300 bawat kilo para sa kapakanan ng mga mamimili. Pangalawa, ang DA ay gagawa ng mga hakbang para buhayin ang swine industry ng bansa. Ito ang repopulation program. Siyempre po, naubos ng ASF. Paano tayo makakabangon? Kinakailangan. Bigyan natin sila uli ng palalaki mga baboy na walang ASF. Pangatlo, papalakasin ng DA ang bantay ASF sa barangay para ma-manage, maiwasan at makontrol ang African swine flu kasama ng DA, ang LGUs, pribadong sektor, veterinary groups at hog raisers association.
The Department of Transportation unveiled today the giant cutter head of Kaunlaran, the first of the 6 tunnel boring machines that will be used in the construction of the Philippines Metro Manila subway. The cutter head is used to break, cut, and grind rocks and soil by rotating its 36-piece disc cutter. In his keynote speech, Secretary Arthur Tugade expressed that they are aiming for partial operability by December this year. DOTR Undersecretary for Railways Timothy John Bata noted that the Metro Manila Subway project, along with other 12 railway projects throughout the country, are being implemented at record scale and at record pace. Japanese ambassador to the Philippines, Kazuhiko Koshikawa, expressed Japan's full commitment to support the Philippine government in realizing the country's much-needed transport infrastructure projects. Japan International Cooperation Agency Chief Representative Eigo Azukizawa likewise assures that the agency will continue to do all the best it can for the whole projects under the Duterte administration's Build, Build, Build program. The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, is gearing up for the 2022 elections amid the pandemic with new regulations on voting and election campaigns. Party list groups running next year were also given new guidelines for candidacy. Benj Bondoc reports.
The Commission on Elections has updated the implementing rules and regulations on the party list elections next year. Under COMELEC Resolution number 10690, party list groups have been ordered to file a complete list of at least 5 nominees within the period for the filing of certificates of candidacy. The COMELEC set the deadline for the substitution of nominees on November 15 or until midday of Election Day in case of death or incapacity. Meanwhile, petitions for disqualification of party list nominees must be filed not later than the date of proclamation. The deadline for the filing of petitions for registration and manifestation of intent to participate is on March 31. Meanwhile, the COMELEC is looking to allow at least 5 voters inside precincts at a time for next year's elections in case the coronavirus pandemic persists. COMELEC Chairman Sharif Abbas said this aims to control the number of people inside voting centers in compliance with health protocols. Abbas, however, said they are coming up with other ways to allow people to exercise their right to suffrage without sacrificing their safety amid the pandemic. On the other hand, COMELEC spokesperson James Jimenez said they are looking at mail voting and online voting as an alternative option. At the same time, the COMELEC official added that they are also looking at allowing online campaigning. Meanwhile, Malacanang says the holding of the traditional face-to-face campaigning is still possible, depending on the success of the government's mass immunization drive. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said in-person campaigns could still be done if the government reaches its goal to vaccinate 100% of the adult population. Jimenez had floated the possibility that face-to-face campaigning might be prohibited for the 2022 national elections to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in the country. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Benj Bondoc.
A magnitude 5.4 quake jolted Camarines Norte Friday morning. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PHIVOLC, said the quake's epicenter was traced in Tinaga Island in Camarines Norte around 6 a.m. with a depth of 1 kilometer and tectonic in origin. Intensity 4 was felt in Jose Panganiban, Camarines Norte. Intensity 3 in Guinayangan, Quezon. Intensity 2 in Gumaca, Mauban, and Lopez, Quezon, and Intensity 1 in Marikina City and Pasig City and San Rafael, Bulacan. In our business news, the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, is keeping its growth target of 6.5% to 7.5% this year. NEDA says it sees the economy maintaining such growth next year, taking into account the short and medium-term impacts of the pandemic. Next year's gross domestic product target under the updated Philippine Development Plan is lower than the 8 to 10% growth forecast announced by the Development Budget Coordination Committee last year. The NEDA also kept the 7 to 9% target for the unemployment rate for this and next year, while revised its poverty incidence target to 15.5% to 17.5% from the original 13 to 15%. Meanwhile, the NEDA likewise maintained a 2 to 4% target for inflation for 2021 and 2022. The country's inflation rate averaged 2.6% in 2020. Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand are shown to be the top 3 nations in Southeast Asia with the highest inclination in adopting electric vehicles. Frost & Sullivan associate partner Vivek Vaidya said one of the three customers in ASEAN is still certain to consider purchasing an electric vehicle in the next 3 years. Readiness to buy electric vehicles came about on the back of COVID-19, which affected income, employment, and oil prices. Vaidya also noted a significant lowering of barriers for ASEAN consumers to purchase electric vehicles. He said increased environmental awareness, lower maintenance costs, coupled with tax incentives and improved charging facilities will be the key motivators for consumers to possibly switch to the electrified vehicles in the future. Nissan Regional Vice President for ASEAN Isao Sekiguchi meanwhile said the company is encouraged by the development in the perception of Southeast Asian consumers to e-vehicles. Up next, the Interagency Task Force expands the list of foreigners who can enter the country. And Sasmuan coastal wetland in Pampanga gets international recognition. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Alamin ang mga dapat gawin sa lugar ng trabaho laban sa Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ang mga kumpanya ay dapat magbigay ng face mask sa kanilang mga empleyado. Bukod dito, magbigay kaalaman din patungkol sa COVID-19. Siguraduhing malinis ang kapaligiran. Maglagay ng sabon at hand sanitizer sa mga palikuran. Siguraduhing ligtas at nalutong maigi ang mga pagkain sa kantina. Obserbahan ang kalusugan ng mga empleyado at katrabaho. Kung sakali man na mayroon silang sintomas ng coronavirus disease, gaya ng lagnat, ubot-sipon at hirap sa paghinga, ay agad ipasuri sa doktor. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
The Interagency Task Force on Thursday expanded its list of foreign nationals allowed entry to the Philippines amid tightened pandemic measures. The IATF EID allowed the entry of foreign nationals with valid visas issued as of March 20, 2020 and who are not permitted to enter the country under previous IATF resolutions. Also allowed to enter the Philippines are holders of valid and existing special resident and retirees visa and Section 9A visas as long as they present an entry exemption document to the Bureau of Immigration. This shall all take effect on February 16. The IATF likewise granted the request of Baguio City for its hotels and other accommodation establishments to accommodate leisure travelers while under general community quarantine or GCQ. Police arrested 2 members of the Communist New People's Army in SURIGAO del Sur and Agusan del Sur, while several more surrendered to authorities. More on this from Marita Muwahe.
Police arrested 2 Communist New People's Army militiamen allegedly involved in the attacks on army detachments in separate manhunt operations Wednesday. Ben Manaytay, a resident of Lingig, Surigao del Sur, was identified as one of the rebels that harassed the patrol base of 67th Infantry Battalion, Philippine Army in Barangay Raha, Kabunsuan on May 18, 2018. Manaytay, who is facing charges of murder and frustrated murder, is also listed as among the top 10 most wanted persons in Surigao del Sur. The Agusan del Sur Police Provincial Office also arrested Ando Pio of San Luis, Agusan del Sur based on the arrest warrant issued by the RTC Branch 6 in Prosperidad for murder. Pio was one of the perpetrators who attacked an army detachment in La Paz Town in 2018. Meanwhile, armed men believed to be communist NPA rebels shot to death a government militiaman in Tandag City, Surigao del Sur, Wednesday afternoon. The victim, identified as Darwin Wagpao, is a farmer and a former member of the Citizen Armed Forces Geographical Unit. Police said the victim is a former NPA rebel who surrendered and availed the program of the government. In other news, more members of the NPA in Samar provinces have abandoned the communist terrorist group ideology and turned themselves in to authorities this week. In Lavezares, Northern Samar, NPA squad fighter alias Rex surrendered to the Police Mobile Force Battalion on Wednesday, turning over a .45 caliber pistol with magazine and 6 ammunition. In San George, Samar, alias Pedi, a vice squad leader voluntarily surrendered to the local police on Wednesday. He has been evading arrest after facing an attempted murder case filed in 2010. In Northern Samar, alias Esther and alias Rolly also voluntarily surrendered to policemen on Tuesday. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muahe.
In sports, international sports officials on Wednesday published the first list of regulations, also known as playbooks, on responsibilities and safety measures against COVID-19 during the Summer Olympic Games in Japan. In a statement by the International Olympic Committee, the playbooks establish principles that stakeholders will follow when traveling to Japan during and after their time at the Games. Among the guidelines, athletes are required to use smartphone applications to constantly report about their health condition, to minimize contacts with other people, and to keep track of their actions. There is no requirement for all athletes to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Yoshiro Mori, the head of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics Local Organizing Committee, said that the Summer Olympic Games would start on July 23 and the Summer Paralympic Games would begin on August 24, 2021. Tourism workers from non-accredited but government licensed establishments are now qualified to apply for the COVID-19 financial aid. The Department of Tourism and the Department of Labor and Employment amended its joint memorandum or circular for financial assistance and cash for work program for displaced tourism workers. Tourism Chief Bernadette Romulo Puyat said the cash assistance program under the Bayanihan 2 can benefit more displaced workers, especially those in the informal sector. Local government units and tourism enterprises are instructed to extend assistance in the completion of documentary requirements for qualified tourism workers. Qualified beneficiaries of the program are urged to get in touch with the designated focal persons of the DOT regional offices in their respective areas. The Sasmuan, Pampanga Coastal Wetland, or SPCW, is now a Ramsar site or wetland of international importance. The declaration was made on Tuesday by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources and the Ramsar Secretariat based in Gland, Switzerland. The SPCW is the 8th Ramsar site in the country and first in Central Luzon. It covers more than 3,500 hectares of coastal waters and 4 barangays in Sasmuan town. More than 80,000 migratory birds composed of 63 species have been observed in SPCW during the January 2021 Asian Waterbird Census. The DENR appealed to the public for their active collaboration to sustain the development and protection of SPCW. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. List of priority groups for COVID-19 vaccine is now approved. Subway project in Metro Manila is underway. Filipinos are among those who are more inclined to buy electric vehicles. And Sasmuan Coastal Wetland in Pampanga gets international recognition. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, we tell stories that inspire change. I am William Theo. Good day and a very happy weekend to everyone.